2024 will come to be known as the year of elections. The British general election, the European Parliament elections, and of course the big enchilada, the American presidential election. Let me start with the British general election. On the 4th of July, the summer surprise, a seismic development, the first, probably not the last, in the British general election has just occurred. The erstwhile leader of the anti-European Union movement, first called UKIP, then called the Brexit Party, now called the Reform Party, Nigel Farage, is back. He's back in the electoral fray. He's elbowed his mate, Richard Tice, out of the way. He'll only need him now for his deep pockets, his money bags. Farage has taken charge of the Reform Party and is standing in the British general election. Now, this is fatal for the Conservative Party, perhaps existentially fatal, by which I mean there may be no Conservative Party left after this general election. They were already facing a wipeout, but now they may be facing extinction. But in 2015, Nigel Farage took more votes from Labour than they did from the Conservatives. So I'm the first one out of the blocks saying that Farage re-entering British politics, coming into this general election campaign, is very bad news for both sides of the uni party, both cheeks of the same backside. Because however much you might dislike his right-wing nationalist rhetoric, he is the single most individually popular politician in the country, in a race where it's difficult to distinguish which of the big two are the least popular. Nobody is moving out of love for Rishi Sunak or of the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer. People will vote for them, fewer than they think, but only because they're not the other. If there's a third option, or in my case, and the case of my guest this evening, a fourth option, then us from the left and the Reform Party from the right have a real chance to break up that uni-party concert that has been anticipated. It's a very significant development indeed. It makes the possibility of a hung parliament much more likely. And a hung parliament is what I am campaigning for. Of course, there will have to be an agreement reached amongst all the parties elected at the general election as to a way forward. Who will be the Prime Minister? Who will be the Foreign Minister? What will be the shape and form of the British government? And all of us, depending on our strength inside that Parliament, will have a price tag. Our price tag will have as number one the introduction of proportional representation into British elections, so that if you get 10% of the votes, you get 10% of the seats, and so on. Our second item on our price ticket will be a complete end to British involvement in the Israeli crimes against the Palestinian people. And we have other items on our ticket also. In the European elections, interest will focus on how well Sarah Wagenknecht of the new left-wing party in Germany and how well the AfD, the Nigel Farage equivalent in Germany, are going to do. There will be much interest in these islands on how well Sinn Féin, after their recent missteps, are going to do. Whether the wonderful duo of Claire Daly and Mick Wallace will get back into the European Parliament, how well Le Pen will do in France. So it's the year of elections, and I haven't even touched on the big enchilada yet. I know that my guest and our guests on the video wall will certainly do so. It is Have It Out with Galloway. In a sane Britain, Craig Murray, the Honourable Craig Murray, former British ambassador, would be the Foreign Secretary, and he might yet be, because he is standing in the British general election for the Workers' Party of Britain in the constituency of Blackburn, a seat once held by the war criminal Jack Straw. That war crime was the war crime committed against the people of Iraq. But Labour are still committing war crimes by supporting Netanyahu's murderous, genocidal series of massacres. Labour have very firmly put themselves in the dock, and you wouldn't want anybody else to prosecute them than the Honourable Craig Murray, author, former ambassador, broadcaster, and human rights activist. Please welcome the one and only Craig Murray. Craig, you join us from your constituency of Blackburn, but just out of a sense of British fairness, we'll not talk too much about the constituency itself. But first, your reaction to the emergence of Nigel Farage back on the electoral scene.
Well, I think nobody is surprised. It's the least surprising development of this rather strange early election campaign. It's hard to know how much traction he will have. Brexit has happened, and because of the way it has happened, it hasn't been enormously successful. Very few of the benefits which were anticipated have actually come to pass. It could have been successful if done more sensibly than the Tories have managed it, but in fact it hasn't been successful. So he doesn't have Brexit to bang on about. And when it comes to anti-immigrant rhetoric, it's a crowded field. The Tories are extremely keen on anti-immigrant rhetoric and crazed schemes to send people to Rwanda, and everybody's yelling, "Stop the boats." And now the Labour Party is joining in, saying they will clamp down on immigration more than the Tory party. So there's this kind of race to the bottom on immigration, and I don't think there's anything else in Nigel Farage's locker. He really doesn't have another subject to bang on about. So I'm not certain. I think he, of course, he will take some votes, and I think you are right in saying he would probably take them at least equally from both the main parties. But I also think general elections where the main parties pick up a lot because of the media coverage. Although, having said that, of course, the more you see Sunak and Starmer, the less inclined most people are to vote for them. They're not exactly the most attractive of candidates. This reminds me, of course, of what happened with Theresa May, where in 2015, I think, or 2017, where the more voters saw of her, the less they liked her. And I think the exposure, especially of Keir Starmer, is going to lead to a continual fall in the Labour vote.
I think what he will be is a disruptor of what is, we called them a uni party, we called them two cheeks of the same rear end and all that, but they are daily proving it. Their policies are exactly the same. Today, for example, Labour has pledged to spend just as much on weapons and war as the Conservatives had already announced they were going to do. I was on Times Radio earlier today, right after a couple of superannuated defence spooks and ex-defence ministers, and they were tossing the billions, tens of billions, around on the table as if they were sweetie papers. They were going to buy this ship and that aeroplane and these long-range guns, and they were going to fight in the Black Sea, fight in the Red Sea, fight in the South China Sea, and both parties are committed to exactly the same foreign policy, defense policy, and increasingly economic policy. It's not just Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Tweedledee has merged into Tweedledum, hasn't he?
I think that is absolutely true. You know, there's no policy, there's no major party, the two main parties, which is not a war party now, and they are insane. You know, they appear to wish to do defense spending, and they appear to wish to do it deliberately to provoke conflict with Russia. You know, it's plain from their rhetoric that they intend to do this. They intend to buy, obviously, weaponry to position it as close to Russia as possible, to aim it at Russia, in order to provoke conflict with Russia, but conflict with Russia will then justify the need for even more weaponry in this crazy, vicious circle. And it should be said, I'm a historian, and British-Russian relations is something I have specifically studied and written books on. And there has never, ever in history, ever existed any Russian plan to invade any part of the United Kingdom. You know, that's just a mad fantasy. And yet it's a fantasy which has taken hold for, you know, you can go back to the 1720s for the first appearance in British newspapers of stories about Russian troops potentially landing in Scotland, etc. Russia's never remotely wanted to invade Russia, to invade the UK. Yet British troops have, in fact, invaded Russia at least twice, of course, the Crimean War and then the Murmansk expedition in 1914, so in the First World War. So, you know, we are creating a phantom enemy in order to justify the defence spending, a defence spending which is huge and horrific at the time when the Labour Party say there is no extra money at all for the NHS and no extra money at all for schools, for education, for children's meals, for benefits for more than 2 children. Nothing can be afforded except for unlimited amounts of money. And we're talking hundreds of billions of pounds of extra defence spending. Labour talking of a 25% increase in defence spending. It's absolutely mind-blowing and utterly, utterly unnecessary to face a threat which frankly does not exist.
Long distinguished career in the diplomatic service, in the Foreign Office, in public life, have you ever known a more dangerous time? I mean, I'm a bit older than you and lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis, understanding the dangers of it. I've never known a more dangerous time, the danger of war in the Persian Gulf, the danger of war in the Red Sea, in the Black Sea, in the South China Sea. Do you feel that way too?
Absolutely. I think we are in extreme danger. And I think for example, the decision to give long-range weapons, long-range missiles, long-range strike capability to the Ukraine, and then authorize them to use our long-range weapons to strike deep into Russia. You know, that's moving beyond proxy war. That's really becoming war. And the idea that we then expect the Russians not to react to that and not to do anything to us when we are deliberately giving the ability to kill civilians deep inside their own territory, this is mad. This is Doctor Strangelove stuff. This is precipitating possible nuclear conflict coldly and deliberately in the interest of the arms industries. It's not in the interest of anybody else. And of course, we've seen the total support for. We've talked a great deal. We don't need to talk more now about the genocide in Gaza, but the way that the West has lined up uncritically and absolutely behind Israel and is looking to provoke war now, an absolute conflagration in the Middle East, which will embrace Lebanon, will embrace Iran, will embrace Yemen, will cause. We will yet see uprisings in Saudi Arabia and in Bahrain, for example, by their Shia populations. All this is being deliberately provoked. That's the extraordinary thing. There is no need for any of this war at all. The Ukraine war would be easily settled as a diplomatic negotiation if they were the will to do so. The Russians have indicated they do have the will to do so. It was nearly settled a couple of years ago. I was actually present in Turkey for the proximity talks. This is a deliberate stirring up of war for the sake of stirring up war, for the sake of political control that fear gives to the politicians. You put enough fear into your people, you can control them, and for the sake of giving money to the arms industry, which of course is the most corrupt of all industries and the best place for kickbacks and jobs after you retire and all those things, directorships. So this is mad. It's extremely dangerous and very, very hard to believe it is happening.
Which segues into my next question. In November, the American people will be asked to choose between not Tweedledee and Tweedledum, relatively speaking, two benign figures, but will be asked to choose between Genocide Joe and unhinged, utterly unpredictable Zion Don Trump. What can we hope from that election?
It's difficult to hope for anything. I was almost tempted to say, but I won't say it because it's a wrong thing to say. But we can hope that neither candidate will make it till November. But it's extraordinary. The idea that in a great country like the United States, great in terms of its economic achievement, great in terms of the contribution to civilization of some of its writers and thinkers, the country that produced Noam Chomsky, let's forget, as well as produced Donald Trump. Let's not forget, the good people who have come out of the States, the important people, Cornel West, these people, all products of American civilization too. But in a country like that, how can it be possible that the two best people to lead the country are Joe Biden and Donald Trump? But if you had a competition in your village as to who was the best person to run the local library, neither Donald Trump nor Joe Biden would be in the running. You would definitely have somebody in your local village who would be better than either of them. So it is extremely difficult. My own view, and this may be controversial, and it certainly was true when it was Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump. I think that after she destroyed Libya, if Hillary Clinton had been elected, I honestly believe we would have seen the total destruction of Syria, the absolute destruction of Syria. We would have seen hot war between Russian forces and American forces in the Middle East, and the real possibility of that expanding into nuclear conflict, and certainly it would definitely expand into a wider conventional conflict, at least, involving Iran, and even more deaths of millions of people in the Middle East. And I do give Donald Trump credit. I think he averted that very, very real possibility. But he is wildly unpredictable. And he's not actually saying, he did go into the 2016 election saying quite good things about ending forever wars and the kind of isolationist idea of not wasting American troops overseas. So and he's not really using so much of that rhetoric now, and his pro-Israeli rhetoric is quite scary. So it's hard to be sure. But any idea that the Democrats are left-wing, or that people should vote for Genocide Joe to keep out Trump, and it's a duty of left-wing people to vote for Genocide Joe, no. It has never ever, under any circumstances, the duty of any left-wing person to vote for genocide. And no left-wing person, or no person even with a social conscience, even if you're not left-wing, even you're a social democrat or a real liberal, somebody who really values human life and potential. If you're any of those things, you cannot vote for Joe Biden and you cannot vote for the Labour Party in the UK.
Honourable Craig Murray, I'll let you get back to your campaigning in the Blackburn constituency. Thank you for joining me on Have It Out with Galloway. Now, this is the bit where the public get to have their say, at least the public who've emailed us, www.haveitoutwithgalloway.com, and we have a splendid array of ladies and gentlemen with a point of view. Let's go to Tom Sullivan in London first. Tom, give me your views on what we're talking about here, or indeed any other matter you'd like to raise.
George, Nigel Farage has thrown his hat back into the electoral ring. Seeing as you share many domestic policy positions, from Brexit to migration to voting reform to cultural issues, and keeping in mind that not so long ago, Mr. Farage used to speak about how the West set Ukraine on fire and destroyed Libya and destroyed Syria and Iraq and so on. My question to you is, can you see yourself working with him in any capacity? And in your view, on the big issues, is he any different from the rest of the political class?
Well, under Richard Tice, the Reform Party definitely was not. It was a third cheek of the same backside, supporting the same wars, the same economic policies, the only difference being a slight uptick in vulgar abuse. But there's no doubt that Farage coming back is a firecracker thrown into the arena because he has the ability, populist ability, to reach parts that Richard Tice never could. I, of course, shared platforms with Mr. Farage in support of Brexit, as I would support being on a platform with the Archbishop of Canterbury to try and bring an end to the slaughter in Gaza, if only the Archbishop of Canterbury was in favour of that. I'll share platforms with anyone and will be prepared to ally with anyone in support, in the interests of what's right. And I will share platforms with nobody in support of what's wrong. So, of course, if there's a hung parliament, which I must tell you I now expect there to be, then there will have to be negotiations in the House of Commons. And if I'm re-elected, if I'm there, I suspect there will be at least one issue on which Farage and I will be jointly pressing. And that is for the introduction of proportional representation, a fair voting system, so that the members of the House of Commons properly reflect the way that the people voted. In 2015, when Farage took more votes from Labour than he did from the Conservatives, his party got 4 million votes and did not get one single member of Parliament. That's ludicrous, utterly undemocratic. Whereas the Liberal Democrats, who got very little more than that, had a shed load of MPs. And of course, the two big parties get landslide majorities in general elections on a minority of the vote. Even Starmer, who's riding high in the polls, at least until today, is only on 40%. But for 40% of the vote, you get about 7/8 of the seats in the Parliament. So that's why I say, if they have to negotiate with me, then that will be my first demand. But I have others. Tom, thanks for the question. I think I'm going to go to Paul Thorpe in Sussex next. Go ahead, Paul.
Good afternoon, George. After the huge success of the Patriots weekend, led by Tommy Robinson, where over 20,000 people, myself included, attended a hugely peaceful day with no trouble and no violence, is it not now time to admit and respect the fact that this brave man leads a decent patriotic movement and not one from the so-called far right?
Well, all of the things you just said there were wrong, but the first thing was that 20,000 people were there. The police say that 5,000 people were there, and that's about what the pictures look like to me. That's not a small number, by the way, to march behind a jumped-up little neo-fascist and his urinating, belching, boozing, dope-smoking mates. 5,000 people marching behind somebody under a fake name, calling himself Tommy Robinson, when that is not and never has been his name. A shameless little grifter, multiply convicted of crimes, usually involving the baiting of people of colour. That's 5,000 too many, and I regret very much that you were one of them, Paul. I saw the rivers of urine left on the streets of London by the tanked-up Tommy fans and friends. But what worries me is that if little Tommy had his way, it wouldn't be rivers of urine that were running in Britain, but rivers of something darker. Steve, where are you? In Chatteris, number 4, Steve Wheeler. Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead, sir.
Can you hear me? Or
yeah, I can hear you fine. Go ahead. The whole world is watching. I'm mad as hell,
and I'm not going to take it anymore. Do you remember that?
I do, yeah. Broadcast news.
What about? Yeah, exactly right. Now, the previous, you hit upon my previous point, which I made regarding PR, which any sane person would see as a prerequisite for representation. So, to my mind, the electorate are being demotivated because people feel that unless they vote for a cheek, as you would say, or vote tactically, which means they're betraying their own values, what is the point? So this demotivation has been going on for decades, and people go on about PR saying, oh, well, look at Italy, it's terrible, they've no stability. In real life, the adults in the room have to talk and negotiate with each other to get to a settlement. You cannot just bulldoze your way in a strong and stable, remember that one?
Yeah.
A farce. So,
well, I wish there were grown-ups in the room, Steve. I wish there were grown-ups in the room, but I've just spent 54 sitting days in this Parliament. It's my 7th time to be elected to Parliament. I sat for 54 days, and I'm still looking for the grown-ups. I'm still looking for the people that could in any way be counted on to sail our ship of state out of these extremely troubled waters that we are in, whilst taking on water and listing badly. And that's how I would describe our country. The idea that voting for one cheek or the other cheek of the same backside is going to take us out of the holes that we have dug for ourselves misses several important points. First, it's the people we're being asked to vote for that dug the holes in the first place. Second, it presupposes that either of these two parties has any intention of taking us out of these holes. They really don't. Their belief is that they should keep on digging. So if I was given, we're running hundreds of candidates, but there will be, therefore, hundreds of seats in which we don't have a candidate. So in those seats, the best advice I can give is don't vote Tory or Labour. Don't vote for the Uni Party. Vote for anybody, including spoiling your ballot paper if necessary. Vote for anybody other than Labour and the Conservative Party, and in that order, by the way. Let me go to Denmark, where Jan is on the line. Jan Larsen in Denmark. Welcome, Jan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'll try my best because it's the first time I tried this. But I'm coming in with a bit of a different view. Not that it's against yours or anything, not at all. I've seen it from, we have in Denmark also representative democracy as you have, as they have in USA and so on. But I see it from above, where I hope that you will be one that will try to get more influence to the people. Because many have tried it during the years and so on for any kind of Vietnam thing and so on. But this time really ask for it, because as in USA, as a primary, they don't at all include the voters and so on. They only get to vote one time each 4 years, and everybody also do it in Denmark and so on, and in UK also. So I go off, mine is sort of a democratic revolution, and it cannot happen just in 1 second or in 1 year, but that's the thing that I think we need a version 2 of this. And I call it, in the lack of different, I call it people's democracy. I don't want to call it direct democracy because it's so full of bad, you can say like naive, but I really think that that is the thing that we need. And I hope that you will be one that will be able to help a little bit in the UK. And in Denmark, we have the same problem. And I think all around the West, they have the same problem. Now the voters, they are going to independent medias and so on, and also maybe independent social medias later. And to try and get a grip on reality and try to be, you can say, empowered. And I hope that you will be one of those that will try to empower us people, because we are growing.
I mean, although
each
you
day
don't want to call it direct
mental
democracy, what you are advocating is a kind of direct democracy, and I'm not against it in principle. As the technological revolution continues to gather pace, it's perfectly possible for the public to express a view on matters that are in front of the representatives in the democracy, and that the representatives must and should take account of that or pay the price for not doing so. But I can't go all the way with you, and I'll tell you why. If there was a referendum tomorrow and it decided that Britain should send troops to join Netanyahu's army in attacking the people of Gaza, and that's, by the way, not an impossible or even improbable proposition, I would still oppose it. Indeed, I would still oppose it if I was the last man standing, and I would still oppose it whether I was in Parliament or not, whether I was standing in Parliament or standing on the street. So what worries me a little about the direct democracy approach is the protection of minority views, the right of people who hold the view held by only a minority of people can still be expressed and can still find ways to persuade people. We have had several direct referenda in Britain in my lifetime. The ones I've fought are in 1975 when I was Mr. Tony Benn's tea boy, traveling the country to try and withdraw Britain from the European Union. The Scottish devolution referendum in 1979. The Scottish Home Rule referendum in 1999, the Scottish independence referendum in 2014, the Brexit referendum in 2016, the alternative vote referendum, I forget when, but early in the coalition government between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, which was a referendum about almost exactly nothing. So we've had lots of direct democracy. In other words, taking decisions out of the hands of the representatives and giving them directly to the people. Everyone watching can make their own mind up about the quality of the decisions that were reached. I think that this is an issue, though, Jan, that many will want to ponder, and thank you for raising it. Let's go to Sunil Basu in Yatton. Go ahead, Sunil. Hello.
George, your friend, the amazing Michael Hudson, recently wrote an article called America Screws Britain Yet Again. And he described Britain as a mid-sized, resource-poor archipelago. And he's very pessimistic about Britain's situation. Danny Dawlings has written that Shattered Nations, describing the statistics of how Britain is in a dire place. How difficult do you think things are going to get in the next few years?
I think we've never been in a more difficult situation, Sunil, since the late summer of 1940, stretching until the victory in the Battle of Britain in 1941. That's how serious I think our situation is. And as I keep saying, a lot of people don't like it. This time there's no Churchill to emerge and halt what would have been, under the appeasers, Halifax and the rest, a course of existential destruction for Britain. There's no Churchill. And Churchill certainly ain't Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak, or for that matter, Nigel Farage. And so we have a dwarfish political class in charge at a time of existential danger again. I didn't know that my friend Michael Hudson had said that about our sceptred isle. What was it he called it? You quoted a dismal archipelago, and sometimes it can look like that. But I have great faith in the British people. I have great faith in the British working class, our engineers, our scientists, our fintech people, our medical technology people, our great people at the universities of Manchester, Oxford, Cambridge, Glasgow, and so on. I have a lot of faith in the industriousness and in the courage of our people. And so I believe that if properly led, our people can pull themselves out of the nosedive, the death spiral that we appear to be on. But to paraphrase the peerless genius, Dr. Einstein, Professor Einstein, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, then you clearly are entirely mad. Let me go, thanks Sunil, let me go to Zulfikar Ahmad in Manchester. Go ahead, Zulfikar.
Hi, George.
Yes, Zulfikar, go ahead.
So the question I had, it was about the far right, and it was funny that the gentleman Paul called earlier as well. It seems that the far right are just getting more and more far right, and I think that's because they feel isolated or alienated. So the left, shouldn't we be kind of like, or guys like yourself, shouldn't we be kind of going into those communities, the deprived white communities, and trying to get more of a share of the vote and taking people away from the kind of far right parties? And I mean, I can understand how you totally, blasted Paul out of the water, but I don't know. I mean, it's a difficult step to take to try, to bring them on board without being labeled, racist yourself. But I don't know. I'm just
I do try Zulfikar all the time. I spend my life trying. And if Paul had come on here and expressed his far-right views, I would have argued with them, seriatim, one by one. I would have argued with them. But he came on here to puff the little Hitler, Tommy Robinson, and that I cannot allow. It's my duty to, as you put it, blow him out of the water. But the ideas that have circulation and on which people like Robinson feed are real ideas that have to be combated in the real life. And I blame, as I do for most things, the Labour Party for this. If the Labour Party were providing working class people with a proper analysis of the ails of our society and projecting real solutions that would change the material lifestyles of these communities, then there wouldn't be a Tommy Robinson. There wouldn't have been a group of 5,000 people waving, incidentally, British flags and Israeli flags in profusion. Hasn't it come to something that the supporters of Israel, the biggest supporters of Israel in Britain, are the supporters of Tommy Robinson, who comes from the very tradition which created and fueled and carried out the Holocaust against 6 million Jews in the lifetime of some people who are still alive and watching this show. Let me give you a vignette. I used to know a place called Dagenham very well because I was an activist in the Transport and General Workers Union, and we had scores of thousands of members in Dagenham, and I used to travel there. And we had all those members because of the Ford Motor Works at Dagenham, where 10, 15,000 people worked. Blue-collar jobs, union jobs, well-paid jobs. And the people who worked there had a community called Dagenham. And that community had a council house for everybody. It had a municipal swimming pool, municipal libraries, parks, playgrounds. It had everything that you would want a working class community to have. And now it has none of these things, including the Ford Motor Company. And so into the void, into the vacuum created by the destruction of the good jobs, the destruction of the public services, has poured racist ideas. And those racist ideas want to blame not Henry Ford and his heirs and successors, not the council that closed or sold off all those public facilities. They want to blame Abdul on the street corner who owns the little shop, or Mohammed who owns the curry shop that they would like to eat in on a Friday night and trash on a Saturday morning. And it's the duty of people like me, you're right, to fight for a proper attribution of blame and a pathway that people can pursue to achieve economic and social justice. It's Omar in Canada.
Oh, hi, George. How are you?
Welcome.
Thank you. First
Nice
of all, I want
to
to
see
say
your
thank
face.
you for your continuous support for the Palestinians. And
Thank you.
yeah, I wanted to personally thank you. I'm calling from Canada. In Canada, I feel like we don't have a George Galloway. We don't have any viable options to vote for. Both parties are basically the same cheek, but two cheeks of the same ass. Um, basically, we have Pierre Poilievre and Trudeau in their first. As soon as any issues come up, they're the first to label anything anti-Semitic. But when it comes to the Palestinian issue, they're all just like puppets. They follow whatever happens in the U.S. and other governments.
Well, we had the NDP, which was the great hope for a time. But they seem to have turned into a third cheek of that ass. This metaphor is becoming stretched, but they seem to have morphed into just another establishment party. But there must be people, Omar, and if there isn't, you'll have to be the George Galloway. You and others who think like you will have to come to the fore. I'm happy to help you in any way that I can, as I tried to do with the People's Party in America. And I'm not sure whatever happened to that, but we'll have to try again. If it's failed, it'll have to be relaunched. We have to have a third force that is a real third force in all of our countries. We're not the world, of course. Canada, United States, Britain, we're not the world. There's plenty of leaders in the rest of the world, the 87%, which is the rest of the world. But we have to, if we're going to save our people, we have to produce new political forms and leaders. Omar, great to see you. Thanks for the call. Let me go to Solar Tony in Tuvalu. I can honestly say I've never spoken to anyone in Tuvalu before. Tony, welcome.
Welcome, George, and congratulations on the work that you're doing, your election, and good luck on the next one. It is easy to verify that global warming and its effects are real. The dire consequences are climate change, freaky and violent weather events and storms, floods, drought, species extinction, heat waves, loss of property and life, and much, much more. 20 nations out of 200, mostly the USA, the UK, and the European Union, are criminally abusing 80% of the resources of the planet, while our planet limits are being pushed to nearly 200% of its biocapacity. Phase out fossil fuels, plastics, synthetic and persistent chemicals, and precision chemicals. A universal green income, not basic, green. That is a program to transition large amounts of the population from a consumerism-based economy to an eco-sustainable lifestyle, such as new or retrofitted non-toxic passive solar homes using vastly reduced amounts of energy. Rooftop solar PV, not corporate, rooftop, rainwater harvesting, solar cooking, solar hot water, gray water biomass, no flush toilets. Sewers are a mess worldwide. It's an incredible poison toxic soup. And
well, look, Tony, I'm going to have to stop you because I can see from the wall you've got a very long manifesto. So whilst a number of your prescriptions there were ones that I not only support but practice, I have solar, I do collect rainwater, I do try to live as clean and sustainable a life and bring up my large family along those lines. But I cannot go with you down the apocalyptic road of predicting the extinction of humanity. Neither do I like phrases like reducing human footprint. If you mean by that, as many do, the Malthusian and wicked thesis that we have too many people. We don't have too many people on this planet. We have too little economic justice on this planet. And what I cannot accept is that the industrialized countries and even post-industrialized countries can dictate to countries that never yet got the chance to industrialize, didn't yet get the chance to grow their economy, didn't yet get the chance to transform the living standards of these people, that selfishly the big, powerful, rich countries can stop economic growth in the poor countries. Secondly, because I believe that the green movement is a step away from the Malthusian anti-people rhetoric of the Reverend Thomas Malthus in the 19th century, I'm always skeptical of a green apocalyptic thinking and agitating in the way that you have just done. There are many sensible things that we can do to keep the planet cleaner, to preserve species that are in danger. But don't ask me, as the leader of a workers' party, to agree to the working class becoming poorer, colder, in the name of environmentalism. And my last point to you is this. When the rulers of the developed world stop spreading war and devastation and terror all around the world, then they can come back and talk to me about more solar panels on my roof. War is the biggest degrader of the environment, and we're involved now in one hell of a lot of wars. I see on the wall my old friend, Father Gelly. Go ahead.
Great. Look, I want to, if I may, I want to make a somewhat incendiary proposal.
Okay.
Because I've been racking my brains what we can actually do to help Palestinians, to help the people of Gaza. And I have found out that there is actually an organization in Lebanon which receives volunteers who are willing to go over and fight for Palestine. Now, I don't know if that is actually illegal from a point of view in English law, but as there are people who go from Britain to go and fight for Israel, why can't some of us who are willing to do so, and I know I look fairly decrepit, but I'm actually minding myself to go over, and after all, what do I have to lose on my stage in life? I mean, if I get killed fighting for Palestinians, I will not lose many years of life because, given the age I'm at, every day is a kind of victory. So, what about plugging this idea that it is possible to join this organization in Lebanon, which can actually fight physically for Palestine?
No, I have to stamp firmly on it, Father, because to do otherwise would be completely illegal under not just British law, but most of the jurisdictions in which this show will be shown. But not just for that reason. In 1977, when I was living in the Fakani district of Beirut, next to the Coca-Cola factory, and spending my days in the compound of the late President Yasser Arafat, I stayed on and stayed on. Months went by and I stayed on. And one day, President Arafat, who used to give me breakfast, used to feed me boiled eggs, he really liked me. He said, "Why are you still here?" I said, I really can't bring myself to leave. I have fallen so in love with the Palestinian cause that I'm finding it very difficult to leave. And he said this to me: "We don't need any more martyrs here on the front line. We are not short of fighters. We have our own men, and after them our own women, our own boys and girls who will be the fighters. What we lack is somebody like you in a country like yours. What we lack is people who will change the point of view of their own compatriots in their own countries. And he ordered me to leave, Father, and he actually went further than that. He said, if I see you still hanging around here in a week or so, I'll shoot you. So get back to Britain and do your best. And I promised him that I would do so. And I think of all the promises I've ever made, I've kept that one more faithfully than any other. Thank you, Father. Thank you, all my friends, especially my good friend Robus out there in New York, who didn't get in again. I'll make a point of getting to you next time. Thank you all for being on the video wall, being in the participating audience. I repeat again, you can be one of them by emailing us at www.haveitoutwithgalloway.com. We want to see an ever-changing array of faces and from countries not yet discovered by this show, like Tuvalu earlier. Make a mental note of finding Tuvalu on the map. Why don't you? Well, it's been marvelous for me. There's much more that needs to be said, but not enough time for me to say it. 1848 was the year of revolutions. 2024 is the year of elections. If you're watching this in the European Union, you've got elections on Friday. And I hope my friends in Ireland, above all, will re-elect the wonderful Claire Daly and her collaborator and companion, the member of the European Parliament, Mick Wallace. Claire Daly and Mick Wallace are practically the only two decent things in that infested by warmongers and profiteers European Parliament in Strasbourg and in Brussels. I pray for their success in Ireland. I pray for the success of all right-thinking and peace-loving, equality and justice-loving candidates everywhere. And I pray for the defeat of the warmongers and the exploiters. If you are in Britain with a vote in the British general election, well, that campaign just came even more alive today with the intervention of Nigel Farage back at the helm of the Reform Party. And if you're watching in the United States, all I can say is don't vote for either cheek of that particularly foul backside. No good could come out of it. Neither Biden nor Trump is my advice to you in the November presidential elections. Of course, elections are not the be-all and end-all. It's all politics. Me being on your screen is politics. Me being on your screen on the mother of all talk shows is politics. You talking to your neighbor over the garden fence. You talking to your workmate over the bench. You talking to your fellow shopper in the supermarket. It's all politics. We will not succeed in making a better world without persuading people who currently do not yet agree with us that we are right and they should follow us. Of course, that needs leaders. And a leader is someone who says, this is the way to go, I'm going there, and here are the reasons why you should follow me. Until next week, I've been George Galloway, and this has been Have It Out with Galloway. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough.